and dziękuję. I think that's the only word I know in Polish, so I'm going to use it a lot just to show how well I can speak. Thank you very much for coming to this conference. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you to Andrea and Lydia for inviting me. Corporate fundraising in the UK and the case of NCVO. I'm going to head off by telling you a little bit about NCVO, although Andrea has done a very good job of that. But there's a story behind how NCVO was set up, and it started with this man called Edward Vivian Birchall. This was World War I we're talking about, and this man was a philanthropist, quite a rich man. He was recruited obviously in the war, as almost all men at that time, and he said to his friend P. Grundy, if I'm scuppered, which means if I die, I'm leaving you £1,000 to do the things that we talked about. And the things they had talked about was setting up a council for social services, it was called at the time, which, however, is doing pretty much what NCVO is still doing today, namely championing voluntary organizations and volunteering. So here we are, fast forward almost 100 years, we're celebrating our centenary in 2019. We're pretty much doing the same thing, and it's all thanks to the £1,000 that this man donated. So the UK voluntary sector, I thought I'd play a little bit of a film for you, just a 2.5-minute film. We're doing, as Andre mentioned, a piece of research called the UK Civil Society Almanac, which is the flagship piece of research on the UK voluntary sector. So it's used by government, by the private sector, and it gives you the stats and facts about the sector. So how many organizations we have, what is their income, is it growing, is it falling, how many staff do we have working in the sector, what are the organizational assets and investments, etc. So I think this will give you quite a good idea of just what the sector looks like in the UK. Can we play the film? So there's a lot more you can find out by going to that URL. Yes, most of it is free. We have some that are member-only access, but most of the information you'll be able to find in much more detail there. I hope that's given you a good overview. Just in case the film wasn't going to work, I made a few slides, because with technology you never know. So I'm going to skip over them now, because you've seen this information in the little video, about the number of people, of organizations, about the causes, especially children, the elderly, and people with disabilities. These are the most popular charities. And as you have seen, quite a big difference in the number of small organizations that have very little income. They're very big in terms of number, but very little income. And there's a few, just about 3% of organizations that hold the vast majority, over 80% of the income. So, the Save the Children's, the Oxfams, those ones have most of the income, unsurprisingly. And yes, the working force in the voluntary sector is just under half of what is in the NHS, which is the National Health Service. Yes, the GDP of Cyprus, I quite like that. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? Great. Yes, I forgot about the mic. Good. So this one is not a stat that you've seen in the film, so I thought it might be useful to pick it out. This is the contribution of the private sector to the income of voluntary organizations, which is 4%, so not very big, 1.9 billion. And I looked at what the US is doing, and it seems to be $18.46 billion. Even with the exchange rate and everything, it's very far from reaching those kinds of numbers. Obviously, there's a difference in population and number of businesses and so on, but still, I think that's a massive difference. So definitely, there's more that can be done in terms of increasing that income from corporate organizations. And this is one that tracks, we started the Almanac in 2000, so we've now had about 15 years worth of data to be able to see how to track the income from the corporate sector. So as you can see, interestingly, today, the data is from 2015, it's almost on par with what it was in 2000 when we started tracking. That's not great, but obviously there's been a lot of exciting things happening in between these two dates. A massive drop in 2003, then it went up a little bit, obviously it went down when the recession came, and it sort of goes up and down. It seems to be a bit more stable now, but obviously it will be interesting to see what happens now with elections and Brexit for us to look forward to. This gives you the pretty much like the income for large charities in general. As you can see, they make the most of the income from the corporate sector as well. So we classify them into micro, which is I think charities with an income of up to £10,000, then small up to £100,000, and so on. They don't raise much money, as you can see, from corporates. Unsurprisingly, because of course you need resource, people, time, and money to be able to raise that income. So the large organizations are the ones that have that income. In terms of what sort of mechanisms charities use to raise this money from corporate organizations, I've classified them in these sort of three quite large categories. One is marketing related, which essentially means there's a commercial relationship there. So you'll have, let's say, a product that you're marketing and you're using as a business, you're using the brand of a charity to sell that product. So Pampers and UNICEF, for instance, that sort of thing. And we call that cause-related marketing. Sponsorship is one as well, obviously, all the marathons, all the things that companies can sponsor. And licensing, you have a product that you can license. Employee-related is what we call in the UK COTIs, so COTI agreements, charity of the year. Businesses will choose, and it's probably the case here, will choose a charity that will be their charity of the year and will focus all their fundraising activities on raising funds for that particular charity. And that could involve employees volunteering for the charity as well. It could involve employee fundraising or payroll, which is when you give a little bit of your income every month to a charity. Other types of mechanisms could include just straightforward donations. Of course, these are great because they represent unrestricted income, so you don't have to tie it to a certain project that you need to deliver, which is important for charities. Gifts in kind, secondments, so when an employee from the corporate organizations is seconded to a charity to help with whatever area they're struggling with, and membership. We're a membership organization ourselves, so membership is a source of income for us. And in terms of trends, I thought I'd bring in Indiana Jones a little bit because you seem to have an informal atmosphere here, so I thought it hopefully will be appropriate. The strategic partnerships, we think, are the sort of holy grail of corporate fundraising. More and more companies are realizing, as are charities, that actually a partnership, a true partnership, goes beyond a financial contribution. And there are other elements that need to be aligned. There are values that should be aligned between the charity and the company. There are skills to be shared. So there are, money is not everything. So strategic partnerships are the key. To give you a classic example, GlaxoSmithKline and Save the Children. They do amazing work in developing countries, and it's because it's a strategic partnership. It's aligned to the business's values and to the charity's values as well. Employee engagement. This is something that businesses are realizing more and more that they can't do without. If they're going to have their corporate social responsibility activities aligned to their business strategy, which is what the trend is at the moment, they need their employees on board. So they need to find ways to engage those employees. How can we tap into that as charities? What can we do to ensure that we support businesses with that employee engagement in a way that obviously is beneficial to us as organizations? So volunteering, I think, and employee volunteering is key here. What can we do as organizations to create those opportunities for corporate organizations to volunteer for our charity? And that can mean, something as simple as painting a wall, although we encourage organizations to look beyond that and look at skilled volunteering. Actually, what are the skills that we don't have in our own organization that perhaps a corporate partner could support with? Can they help us, do our fundraising strategy or our social media engagement strategy, etc.? So this is actually a badge from NCVO that we have made this year. Life is short, volunteer. And the third trend I felt was quite important is impact measurement. And this is both on the business side and on the charity side. Charities, of course, want to make sure that they can prove to a business, if you engage with us, this is what we do, this is our impact, this is the good that we do in the world. That obviously is a motivating factor for the business. But equally, for a business, how can we as a business prove our social impact? How can we prove that actually it's not just the bottom line that's a priority to us, but it's what we call the 3 Ps, people, planet, profit. So we go beyond the bottom line. Actually, the community in which we operate is important to us. Our customers are important to us, their values. We want to share those values with them. So how can we prove that actually we go beyond that bottom line and we make a social impact in the world? More and more businesses are trying to reach that ideal where their impact is positive. So it's not just offsetting the negative impact that you have, for instance, on the environment, but actually how can you create positive impact? How can you create more energy to make a difference? And now this is my sort of second part of the presentation, and please do put down any thoughts that you might have or questions, and obviously we'll chat at the end. How do we do it at NCVO? We're not a classic sort of traditional charity in the sense that we don't have a soft cause. We don't support children with disabilities. We don't support donkeys or dogs or whatever other cause. We support other charities. So we don't receive donations from individuals, for instance, which means that we just have to be a bit more clever about how we generate our income in a commercial sense. So for us, working with the corporate sector is quite important. I think we're sort of on a par with what the situation is, generally speaking, in terms of the income that is gained from the private sector. So we're about 4% ourselves. And we do focus on strategic partnerships. We have about 10 to 15 partners that we would call strategic. And we engage both with corporate social responsibility teams from a business, as well as with the marketing or the charity business team. Usually the businesses that are interested in NCVO are businesses that also have a market in the charity sector. So they have clients because they are IT services providers or they're insurance providers. So any service that a charity might use, because of NCVO's reach into the sector and because of our membership, they want to be associated with us. So it's sort of both these areas, both these teams that we talk to. And we have three main areas of work. One is, I already mentioned, corporate membership. We have about 100 members. One is sponsorship. We run quite a few events during the year. We have publications and websites that need sponsoring. And we have Step on Board, which is our sort of flagship program that we're very proud of. It's a board placement program, and I'll come on to it in a minute. I'll take them each in turn now. So as I mentioned, with corporate membership, we have about 100 members. They're very, very different. You'll have your one-man band freelance consultant offering services to the sector, up to Barclays, British Gas, the BBC, The Guardian. So their needs couldn't be more different, not just from the point of view of the size of the organisation, but also the industry that they belong to. So that's quite a challenge. And I thought I would structure the presentation exactly like that. So what was the challenge, what we did, and what we learned from it, and hopefully there'll be some useful learning for you as well that you can apply. So the challenge was, when I joined the team about over 2 years ago now, the membership was falling. It wasn't falling dramatically, but it was falling. And retention wasn't great. It was under 50%. And also we found by doing surveys that members weren't quite aware of the value of the membership, or sometimes even of what the benefits actually were. So what we did was we surveyed our members. We talked to them in great detail. What is it that you value about NCVO? Why would you want to keep supporting us? We looked at the data. We looked at competitors as well. We felt it was quite important to see actually what are other organizations offering that are similar to us, that are infrastructure organizations, if you want, so organizations that support other charities in the same way that we do. What do they offer corporate partners? And is there something there that we're missing that perhaps we could do as well? Or actually, do they do something that's not working at all, and therefore that's a learning for us as well? So we felt that exercise was quite useful. We also looked at the language that we use, and we felt that we were too much focused on outputs. So we were describing the benefits in terms of, oh, you get 30% discount on exhibiting at our events, or you get 50% discount on this other thing, or you get a free newsletter. But actually, that's not really meaningful. So we looked at it and thought, actually, no, what you get is the opportunity to grow your market in the sector, the opportunity to increase your exposure to the sector through NCVO. You get insight and intelligence. You don't get a free newsletter. You get insight and intelligence from NCVO to support to inform your strategy, to inform the way you're going to move forward with your business plans. So that made, again, a lot of difference as well. And we decided to focus on large members simply because our membership is tiered, so the larger organizations pay more into membership than the smaller ones. And we felt that was the opportunity to increase the income, also because they were able to do more with us and to support the sector in a way that perhaps the smaller ones weren't able to, with skilled volunteering, for instance, by sending their employees to volunteering organizations. So we focused on that sort of 5 million plus market. And we actually decided, yes, we do have benefits, and we changed the language, and that's all great. However, there might be benefits that the BBC will value that British Gas or Barclays will not. And then what do we do about that? So actually we realized that an account management approach and a tailored approach, business by business, as it were, was what was going to work. And when we talked to them, that was indeed the case. Their needs were very different, but they were very happy to be looked after in the way that they wanted, rather than in the way that we offered everyone. So that made a lot of difference as well. So in terms of what we learned, it's quite an obvious one. Do your research. Look at what's out there. What are other organisations doing that perhaps you could learn from, both in terms of successes and failures. One size really doesn't fit all, certainly not for us, and I think for many organisations. When you work with a corporate partner, not, as I said, just because of the size, but even the industry, they might have very different needs, and the culture of the organisation will be very different as well. So that's really important to understand, so you can tailor your approach. Another obvious one, that communication is key. If you don't have an open, transparent relationship with your partner or potential partner, it's very difficult to work with them. So, regardless of where you stand and what your benefits are, just be quite open and transparent with them. This is what we can do, but this is what we can't do. Don't create expectations that then you can't actually meet. Another one that I think is my favorite is people give to people, and it's an interesting stat that the Institute of Fundraising did about, actually we feel that it's 20% technical merit, as in the quality of your product or service, and 80% it's about relationships. So it's about my relationship with this person from Credit Suisse. And as long as that is a very solid relationship, the fact that we have a good product helps, but that's not the deciding factor for them to support us. So quite an interesting one there. And again, another obvious one, but just be helpful beyond what they asked, because they will remember that. And they will need your help, maybe quite rarely, but if you don't give it then, that's what they will remember. So it's, be helpful when it actually matters to them. The second one I'm whizzing through, because I do want to leave a bit of time for questions, is sponsorship. And as I mentioned, we have these two main events, which are the annual conference and the trustee conference. And we have websites and publications that we need sponsorship for. And the challenge was, again, that our packages were quite expensive, and the benefits were, again, quite generic. You get X, Y, Z, and everyone gets the same thing. So not much flexibility there. And they didn't really understand how sponsoring that event would bring return on investment for them if they did sponsor it. It's easier to do that with a website, for instance, because you can measure the engagement. You have ways to measure that, sort of click-throughs and so on. But with events, it's much more difficult. So what we did was we created two basic packages, one for sponsors and one for exhibitors. We have a big exhibition floor with every event, which were at a much lower level from a financial perspective. And what we did was then develop benefits that they could top up their basic package with. And they could just choose, as if from a shopping list, this is what's valuable for me, and I'll just add that. Obviously, we cost it, and we add that on top of their package. But it means that they don't pay a lot for the basic package, but actually then get whatever's most important to them. And it could be a contribution to a workshop, for instance, or it could be a leaflet in the delegate bag, etc. And then we tried as much as we could to prove the value of the event. So by looking at past events, saying, if you sponsor this event, here are a few stats that might be useful for you. Last year we had 60% of attendees at chief executive or director level. And if that's their target audience, that will resonate with them. Or 80% of the organizations had an income of above 5 million, for instance. Again, if that's their target market, if they're looking at large charities because of the service that they offer, for instance, if they're an investment management companies, they will not be interested in small organizations that don't have assets. So it's just trying to give them information that will be meaningful for them and that they will see the value of attending an event, for instance. I think that one is the hardest of all of them. And what we learned is that, yes, it very rarely works to send an email to someone you don't know and expect them to just give you money. It just doesn't work. At least we have found that. And it's much easier to go through someone you know, even if it's the contact of a contact. But it just makes such a difference to do that. Also, we have found that asking something when you've just established a relationship, again, is too early. So knowing when to ask is quite important as well from that point of view. If you ask too early and they don't have that relationship with you of trust and of realizing what the mutual benefit is, they might not go for it. do your research, again, the obvious one. Be flexible with what you can offer. Again, if they want something that you haven't offered, but you may well be able to offer it, then say that you can. Of course, if it's something that will cost you more, don't undervalue yourself and say, yes, we can offer this, we're flexible, but it just costs more because we will invest more time and resource into delivering this particular benefit that you want. And the knowing when to ask is also valid for knowing when in the financial year to ask, because again, if you ask at the end of the financial year, when they haven't yet planned their budget for next year, that's a perfect opportunity for them to include you in the things that they will consider to fund for the coming year. If they've already set that budget, it's very difficult to then be included. So knowing when their financial year starts or ends is very important. Oh yes, and there are 9 no's in fundraising. This is one that you can Google after the conference to see what the 9 no's are. But to give you a clue, there's just one that means actually no, get out of the room, I never want to see you again. All the others are not actually no's. This is my time to finish. Okay, oh dear. The last one is Step on Board, which I just mentioned. It's a program that trains and places business professionals onto charity boards as trustees. Do you know what trustees are in the UK? So they're the people that govern, it's like an executive board. So they're the people that make sure that the strategic direction of the organisation is right, that they govern the organisation well, and they respond to the Charity Commission, which is the body that regulates charities in the UK. So what we do is we go in-house into a corporate organisation and we train these individuals, helping them to understand the voluntary sector, what the responsibilities of trustees are, and how they can get on a charity board. And it's an amazing experience for them in terms of personal development, but it's also an amazing opportunity for the organisations, the corporate organisations, because of the employee engagement element that the programme has. So it's a win-win-win for everyone. We did have challenges with this one as well, in the sense that if there were businesses, obviously Step on Board applies to any large business. It doesn't have to be a business that works with the charity sector. And we are not that well known outside the businesses that actually work with the charity sector. So that's been a challenge for us. We deliver the program in partnership with another organisation. And always, when you deliver things in partnership, obviously you take the risks of the other partner delivering at the same standards as you. We had quite a long sales cycle. So from the moment when we perhaps made the first contact up to when we actually signed a contract, it could take up to 2 years. And that's important to consider as well. And now our client list is growing quickly. So what do we do about that as well? So with the first one, we again approached existing contacts, didn't go with a cold approach, tried to get in through people who know people. And also, as we started to build our client base, we asked clients to recommend us. So we told Google, go and have a conversation with Barclays because we're running the program with them. So their CSR person went to the CSR person from Barclays and had a conversation about the program. And obviously, at that level, then it's much easier to establish that relationship of trust. In terms of delivering in partnership, really important, we felt, to really outline the process so all parties know, what their involvement is at any point, and get tasks that are owned by people so that everyone knows who's leading on what, who's responsible for what. And then once we got to a point where actually our client list was growing and there were too many people in contact with the business partner, creating a bit of confusion, we realized that we really needed just one main point of contact for that business partner. Whatever happens behind, and regardless of the fact that there are 5 other people talking to the coordinator of the program, the business doesn't need to know. The business has one single point of contact, and they feel that the relationship is much easier to conduct in that way. So what we learned is the more you are in the news, the better your PR as an organisation, the more it benefited us because corporate organisations heard about us. It's quite an obvious one. Look at your pipeline, and if you want corporate partners, or you have a product that you want to sell to corporate partners, make sure that your pipeline reflects the length of time it takes for you to sell that product. So if it's a long time, then you have to have a bigger pipeline. Be flexible again, but don't undervalue your service. If they want something more on top of what you're offering, try and give it to them, because they will usually appreciate that a lot and understand if there's a charge on top of your normal rate for the service. They will not appreciate if you're just not flexible and say, no, we can't do this. This is an obvious one. Again, constantly think of ways to improve your product. There are other people at the same time, when you deliver the service, thinking about delivering the same service or perhaps an even better one. So if you're not always on top and one step ahead, there will be others who will take your clients, essentially. And if you make a mistake, and obviously we have done, and everyone does, just own up to it, be quite transparent, don't try and find excuses. Just say, this is what happened, this is what we're going to do to fix it, and then just fix it really quickly. And finally, I'm on my last slide. This is a member of NCVO. We run an annual members photography competition. And this is the photo that the charity submitted called Caring Canines. And it's a picture of a little boy who has a reading buddy. It's the charity's aim is to support children who lack self-esteem and confidence and reading ability. So they read to their doggy buddies, and this creates, increases their motivation to learn to read. And because my child has just started school, I felt this was a nice image to end with, because ultimately this is why we're doing what we're doing. This is why we're fundraising, whether it's for corporate organizations or not. It's to help our beneficiaries and to help the people that make the world a better place, essentially. And I've left the lovely quote from one of my favorite poets, and I have to say, as I told Andrea and Lydia yesterday, I did not look this up for the conference. I actually knew of VII Spotkania before. Yes, this is one of the quotes that I felt was appropriate for today. Just a wish from me through her words to keep up the good work, even if it's just for a tiny galaxy. Thank you very much. Dziękuję.